Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is the mysterious swastika by the Imperator, an article taken from Rosicrucian Digest, Volume 18, Number 10, November 1940. The mysterious swastika by the Imperator. The theory of knowledge has for centuries constituted one of the greatest controversial subjects. In antiquity, it was left to the abstractions of the philosophers. But since the last quarter of the 19th century, it has also engaged that branch of science known as psychology, known technically as epistemology. The problem of what knowledge is now a separate study of both philosophy and psychology. There is no real agreement on the subject yet. This is easily determined from reading the works of such modern thinkers as James, Russell, and Dewey. Briefly, the difficulty centers about whether all that we know, in other words, that which constitutes our concepts, is due entirely to sense experiences or also includes intuitive impressions. Can we, to make the issue more pointed, know something or come to know something which we have never experienced outside of ourselves and which is not composed of anything which we have ever objectively perceived? It is not a simple problem, is it? The alchemy of mind is a very strange one. It is mysterious how a sensation we have, something we feel or see, for example, is converted into an idea or a concept. Most times there is little connection between the sense experience and the idea we come to associate with it. There are many universal notions which we have and which seem to have a very definite meaning to each of us, which we cannot possibly identify with any sense quality or any visual or audible form. The universal notions, for example, of why, where, whence, justice, and loyalty apparently exist in nothing outside of our minds, and yet circumstances and combinations of events create these abstract ideas within us. Since such abstract notions have no existence in any simple thing which we can point out in nature, in other words, since we cannot say this thing is when or this thing is whence, we invent emblems to represent them. Such emblems are called symbols. A symbol, then, is a sign or emblem of an emotion, thought, or experience which we have. Symbols are mainly composed of straight lines or curves. Thus, one may be a geometrical form, like a triangle or a cube, or it may be pictographic, that is, a picture of something. An example of a pictographic symbol is the all-seeing eye. Actually, even in its crudest form, the symbol looks like an attempt to illustrate the human eye, and yet it conveys a far more complex idea both to the savage and to the highly enlightened mystical mind. Almost all symbols, then, are created by the mind. That is, they do not in themselves suggest their content, but are made to represent an idea which the mind has formed. The intelligent person realizes that he is at all times a master of his symbols and that they have no influence over him. However, most primitive minds imbue their symbols and signs with an actual power, which they permit them to exert over themselves. Thus, if while gazing at a rainbow, an aborigine finds a multicolored stone or pebble at his feet, he is apt to make a fetish of it, believing that there is a causal connection between it and the phenomenon he perceives. It not only becomes a symbol of the rainbow to him, but he thinks it possesses the powers of the rainbow, a supernatural influence. This imagined inherent efficacy of symbols has survived until our present time. One of the present belligerent nations of the world adopted the swastika as the symbol of its state. Because of the militant aggression of this state, which has aroused the wrath of most of the peoples of the civilized world, the symbol has, of course, become despised by millions of persons. And this is understandable. On the other hand, we notice a prevalent tendency, a deplorable superstition on the part of many persons, to assume that the swastika, used by this belligerent nation, is a force of evil and adumbrates its better judgment with a sinister force. It is actually stated by some that the swastika, drawn in a different manner, would exercise a beneficial and passive influence upon that nation. Such misconceptions have made it almost impossible to use the swastika today for its traditional symbolic significance without causing people to shun you as either a supporter of the belligerent nation whose emblem it is, or because they feel the imaginary influence of the symbol itself. It is timely and appropriate, therefore, that more be known about it. The swastika, as commonly and conventionally depicted, is composed of 4 gammas, the third letter of the Greek alphabet joined at right angles. More simply, it is a cross with a small arm at each end, at right angles. Usually these arms are turned clockwise as though rotating from left to right. It may also be seen as two letter S's, one bisecting the other. Another and rarely seen form is composed of 3 human legs radiating from a central point. Possibly the superstitions attributed to the swastika by many persons today are due to their unfamiliarity with the symbol, or the presumption that it is rather newly devised to fit the spirit of aggression displayed by the nation which has adopted it. Actually, however, it is one of the oldest emblems or signs known to modern man. Evidence of its antiquity is quite common. It has been found inscribed on terracotta articles at Hisarlik, Troy, from the time of the second burning of the city. In Greece and the Aegean region, it makes its first appearance on articles of pottery having geometrical ornamentation. It is frequently found upon the ancient vases of Cyprus, Rhodes, and Athens. In particular, upon an Athenian vase, it appears thrice repeated before a funeral car in a burial scene. In Vienna, there is a vase in existence on which it appears as an ornament on the breast of an Apollo. It became a favorite symbol on coins in Greece, and passed along with the monetary symbols of the Greeks into the numismatic art of all of the Mediterranean peoples. It has been found upon funeral urns dug up in the terra mares of northern Italy. It is rather common in Egyptian frets. However, its use is not limited to the Mediterranean region. It appears on jewels and weapons of Gaelic peoples and also the early German and Scandinavian peoples. It is obvious then that a symbol, the use of which has been so prevalent and widespread, must have had a more or less continuous meaning. A people discovering it by invasion or through trade relations with other races or nations would not adopt or perpetuate it if its significance was not appealing and impressive to them. If they found it both appealing and impressive, and decided to take the symbol unto themselves, they would not change its meaning, or at least only slightly. The symbol of the swastika spread eastward, possibly through the conquests of Alexander the Great. Its meaning has survived there, and we find it commonly used in the countries of the Orient. To the Buddhists, it is the classical representation with other symbols of the footprints of Buddha or the Buddha Pada, the aspirants to Buddhism. In China, it frequently adorns the priests of Buddha and Bodhisattvas. To the Chinese, it conveys the meaning of a written character, such as a word, for example, and it means plurality, abundance, prosperity, and long life. The unscrupulous but efficient Empress Wu of the Tang Dynasty, 684 through 704, decreed that it should be used as a sign for the sun. In Japan, it represents a number, namely 10,000, and likewise the idea of abundance and prosperity. The word itself is of Sanskrit origin. To the Hindus, the Su represents well or good, and the Asti as it is. It thus is a symbol of good, but the Hindus limit this interpretation to the manner in which it is drawn. For it to be a benevolent sign, the arms must be toward the right. If they are drawn to the left, the symbol is known as a Swastika. The Swas stands for the male principle of the god Ganesha, who is a god of wisdom and of goodness. The Sa represents the female principle and the goddess Kali, who, in Hinduism, is an evil genius. The first symbol then, the swastika, is to Hindus and Brahmins an emblem of the sun in his diurnal course. It depicts light and life. The second one, or the Swastika, represents night and destruction. Dr. Barnabas Sahiushuhu of the Indian Association of America says that the symbol, which must have spread to America from Asia across what is now the Bering Sea, is one of the most important symbols of the American Indian and a token of good luck among all peoples. The American Indian swastika color is gold or goldenrod and sometimes a cardinal red. It will be seen that the 4 positions of the Big Dipper or the Ursa Major yield a perfect swastika. Through the interpretation of the swastika, in comparison with the Big Dipper, medicine men knew when to stage their rituals. The arms were also related to the 4 seasons, 4 winds, and 4 stages of life. The more extensive man's investigation into the origin and meaning of the swastika, the more one learns that it was always a symbol or omen of prosperity, of abundance, of light and life, the one exception being the Swastika of the Hindus referred to above. In its most primitive form, it is a symbol of the sun, in fact partially a pictograph. Undoubtedly early man, when he gazed upon the golden orb in the heavens above, dazzling in its splendor and radiance, seemed to perceive it in swirling motion. The simple swastika, with its arms turned clockwise, depicts this solar orb moving through the heavens and revolving at the same time from left to right. Apparently, the swastika was later used as a symbol of all astronomical motion. Thus, it included the stars and the moon, even water, rain, and lightning. Since many of these forces and elements had to do with primitive man's conception of life and fertility, the swastika came to signify fertility and life itself, and it necessarily follows the goodness and abundance of creation. In light of this, when we think of the present application of the swastika as a national emblem by a militant, aggressive world power, it may seem confusing. But let us keep foremost in mind the principle outlined in the beginning of this article, namely, that man assigns to symbols their import and any influence which they may have. By themselves they are impotent and cannot, because they are adopted by a nation or people, impel them to either good or malevolent deeds. Thought alone is the moving factor in the use of symbols. It must be recalled that the Christian cross, with all of the sacredness now attributed to it, and with all of the inspiration it awakens within the minds of millions of people today, was once a symbol of Roman capital punishment, and during the Crusades, to the Mohammedans it became a sign of oppression and pilfering. What the mind can conceive, the mind can change. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.